Okay, Jesus was one of these students as well. Read the Gospel of the Holy 12. You'll find that when he disappeared from the Bible, where did he go? He went to Egypt. I've taken many people to the actual bed that he slept in, which is still there in Egypt. It's a shrine now. And he was there learning the Egyptian mysteries. And this is well known, well documented. I mean, that was an apocryphal text that was left out of the Bible. He left there and went to Tibet to learn Reiki healing and Qigong and energy healing with his hands. And came down through India, learned the mystic arts. And then the Bible picks up at the age of 32, I called my son out of Egypt. That's what the Bible says. And he ends up riding it on the back of a donkey back in Jerusalem. So that's the loop that's missing out of there, 12 to 32. That chunk is missing out in the Gospel of the Holy 12. Again, he also had the Mason knowledge. Handpicked people would get to learn this sacred knowledge. Masons would actually encode it into structures and buildings, which is encoded all throughout the world, throughout Rome at the Vatican, all throughout Europe, all throughout areas like in Bosnia, believe it or not, where you have the Pyramid of the Sun there in the Bosnian Valley. They literally had a system in which they can identify people who they called adept initiates, people who seem to have some type of ability to perceive things at a higher level or retain knowledge at a higher level or display some type of talent, or ability. And those people were literally handpicked.
Well, I'm going to have to disagree on some of the things that Billy Carson just said. This is why I tell y'all, do not just accept everything that I say, but go and do the research on it, because I'm not going to get everything right. And in this instance, there are a few things, many things that he does get incorrect, and there are some things that he get correct. So first and foremost, let's look at the things that I deem are incorrect and just are incorrect. The first part that's incorrect is that I have to go back and look at it again, but the Gospel of the 12 does not necessarily say that Jesus went to Egypt and spent his life there. It actually, that would go against what the actual gospel Bible say, even though there are conflicts within the Bible, as well as other extra canonical books as well. You see, in your Bible, in Matthew and Luke, both give a description of Jesus's birth and where he went thereafter. In one of them, he went from Bethlehem to Egypt, came back at the age of 12. Now, if he came back at the age of 12, he would have not been introduced to the mysteries during that time frame. It's most likely that he would not, or he would have just got initiated into it at that tender age of 12, which at young ages, because of apprenticeships can begin at the age of 8 or younger. So it's possible while he was in Egypt, according to one of the Gospels, but according to the other Gospel, he left Bethlehem, went to Jerusalem, then went back to Nazareth, and annually his family would make that pilgrimage back to Jerusalem. So there's a conflict within the Bible itself as to where Jesus went. Now, according to the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which is not in your Bible, Jesus spent his life in Nazareth, and in Nazareth, he pushed the boy off the roof and killed him and then brought him back to life. He made some clay pigeons on the Sabbath, and that was considered work, and he made the pigeons turn into real birds, and they flew away. So that's probably more likely fan fiction that was written because people wanted to know what was going on with Jesus during that time frame. And then there's a gospel. I'm not exactly sure which gospel it is, but they call him Isa, and it might be called the Gospel of Isa. But he's called Isa, and that's where he went to Tibet and learned some mysteries in Tibet before he came back to the Roman Empire and came back to Jerusalem. So there are some people who wrote books that would talk about where Jesus went. Now, as far as Jesus being a Mason, I do agree with you on this one. But let me break down Masonry a little bit for you guys. In Masonry, you have something called Operative Masonry and Speculative Masonry. Operative Masons are the ones who actually are doing Masonic work, working stone work, woodwork, building structures, things of that nature. Speculative Masonry is people who are not in the craft personally, but they take the ideas of the craft and make that a part of their lives. And in both instances, it's understanding alchemy and hermeticism, so you know how the universe works, so you can know how your life should work and becoming a better person. And there are mysteries that you do learn as far as how to make those a part of who you are. So with Joseph and Jesus being said to be carpenters or builders, and in old Bible stonemasons, and since there's a ancient rock quarry outside of Nazareth, it is quite likely that Joseph and Jesus would have been introduced into Masonry. And understand it from this point. I know y'all gonna get all into demonic this and demonic that, but there is no religion in Masonry. You can't worship an evil deity in Masonry. It's always been that way. So you can't do that. But they would have become a part of the craft simply because those members of the craft went to become an apprentice and graduate themselves up to fellow craft and then to master through a process of years of working with other masons. And part of that secrecy was keeping secret how to build the things that they were building, like the archways that you see in many of these cathedrals. That was a new technology back in the day. That was something that not everybody could do, and in order to keep their craft to be able to get paid at a higher rate, those things were secretive, and they took those secretive things and made those as part of the craft. Now, some of you are going to say masonry started in 1700s. No, speculative masonry started in the 1700s in England and Scotland. Operative masonry is thousands of years older. It goes all the way back to the builders in Egypt. It goes to the builders in Babylon. It goes to the builders in Assyria. It goes to the builders in Arcadia, Sumeria. It goes back thousands of years of the craft guild. And many different groups had different craft guilds for different things. This was a normal part of society back then. So if Joseph and Jesus were stone builders or wood builders, they would have been part of those craft guilds, which would have made them masons of their era. Masonry has changed a lot. You had Castelligo trying to get masonry to go back, and I'm probably saying his name wrong, go back to the Egyptian rites instead of doing the English or the Scottish rites. But masonry goes all the way back to that time frame. And masonry has always been filled with people of different religions, but they all believe that there is a benevolent God somewhere, even though they're thinking of a benevolent God is kind of jacked up because all their guys got some evil in them, which is why none of them were just good gods. But you couldn't believe in a purely satanic, as y'all would call it, satanic deity. So anyway, most likely, swallowed wrong, Jesus was a part of some type of Masonic guild during that era. But finding the bed that he lived in and all that kind of stuff is a bunch of BS, because the character of Jesus never actually existed. But the characters that Jesus is based off of, they probably existed, and if they were craftsmen, they were masons. So sorry to bust a lot of y'all bubbles, because I know that masonry has a bad rap because the early 1900s and the mid 1900s, people ran for presidency under the anti-Masonic party, basically scapegoating Masons the same way the Germans scapegoated Jews for all the ills that were happening in America. And because of that, and the Masons didn't defend themselves, many of you believe foolishness about the Masonry instead of actually understanding and knowing what it's really about. You can go and buy our books. It's free. It's not secretive. You can buy the books. So there's no secrets about it. Are you going to learn everything? Hell no. So you can go and do that. But that's why you have a negative, some of you have a negative thought process of Masonry, is because of political parties utilizing Masonry as a way to become president of the United States. Think about that. So y'all have a great day. And always remember, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.